The man wasn't supposed to be alive. Ayana found him slumped against the cottonwood tree at the edge of the ravine, his chest rising in shallow, broken rhythms. Blood soaked through his shirt in dark, spreading patches. His hat lay crumpled beside him. His gun was gone. He looked like something the desert had tried to swallow and failed. She should have walked away. Her people were 2 days north, camped near the river where the buffalo grass still grew thick. She'd left at dawn to gather sage and wild onions, slipping away before her aunt could assign her another task she didn't want. Ayana had always preferred the silence of the plains to the voices of the camp, the ones that whispered when she passed, the ones that called her unlucky because her mother had died bringing her into the world, and her father had vanished into the white man's wars before she could remember his face. She was 17, alone by choice, alone by fate, but now crouched beside this dying stranger, she felt the weight of a different kind of solitude. His eyes cracked open, blue like winter sky. He tried to speak, but only a wet cough came out. Ayana glanced around. No horse, no supplies, no tracks leading here except his own. Dragged and desperate, someone had shot him and left him to bleed out under the sun. She reached for his coat, intending to see how bad the wound was. That's when her fingers brushed the pocket. Something small and hard shifted inside. She hesitated, then pulled it free. A bullet, brass casing custom etched along the side in careful, deliberate script. Her breath caught, carved into the metal, in letters she could read because the mission school had taught her English before they'd sent her back to her people, was a single name. Ayana, her name. Her heartbeat filled her ears. She stared at the bullet, then at the man, whose eyes had closed again. His lips moved soundlessly. She leaned closer. "For you," he whispered. "Always for you." Then his head rolled to the side. Ayana's hand trembled. The bullet was still warm from his body. She looked out across the endless flat, where the sun bleached everything to bone, and realized with cold certainty that this man, whoever he was, had been carrying her death in his pocket. And now she had to decide whether to let him take it to his grave. The she could leave him. It would be easy. Let the buzzards do what they were already circling for. Let the desert take him the way it took everything that didn't fight back. She owed him nothing. He was white. He'd carried a bullet with her name on it. That alone should have been enough. But Ayana didn't move. She pressed 2 fingers to his neck. The pulse was there, faint, thready, like a drumbeat fading into distance. He was dying, but not dead. Not yet. She made her decision in the space between one breath and the next. Ayana dragged him into the shade of the cottonwood, grunting with the effort. He was heavier than he looked, all dead weight and loose limbs. She tore strips from the hem of her dress and packed the wound in his side, pressing hard until the bleeding slowed. He didn't wake, didn't flinch. She worked quickly, her hands steady even as her mind raced. Why does he have my name? Who sent him? Why didn't he pull the trigger? She rifled through his pockets. A few coins, a folded piece of paper, stained with blood. She opened it carefully. A sketch, her face, drawn in pencil, detailed and deliberate. High cheekbones, dark eyes, the scar along her jaw from a childhood fall. It was her, unmistakably, rendered by someone who had studied her long enough to know the shape of her silence. Ayana's stomach turned. Beneath the sketch, a single line of text: deliver proof, payment on return, a contract. Her fingers curled around the paper, crumpling it. Someone had paid this man to kill her, and he'd come close enough to do it, but something had stopped him. She looked at his face, weathered, scarred along the temple, younger than she'd first thought, maybe 30. His jaw was tight even in unconsciousness, like a man used to clenching his teeth through pain. "Who are you?" she whispered. He didn't answer. A sound cut through the stillness. Hoofbeats. Ayana's head snapped up, distant but closing, from the south. 2 riders, maybe 3. She grabbed the man's collar and shook him. "Wake up, wake up." His eyes opened, glassy and unfocused. "Someone's coming," she hissed. "Were you alone?" He stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. "You're real," he breathed. "Answer me." His lips pulled into something between a grimace and a smile. "They'll kill you," he said. if they find you with me. The hoofbeats grew louder. Ayana looked toward the horizon, then back at the man. She had seconds to choose, run or stay and face whoever was hunting him, and maybe hunting her. Mash hash hash. She chose the rocks. Ayana hauled the man deeper into the ravine, dragging him behind a cluster of boulders where the shadows pooled thick and cool. He groaned but didn't fight her. She pressed a hand over his mouth. Quiet, she breathed, or we both die. He nodded weakly. She crouched low, peering through a gap in the stone. Two riders crested the ridge. Both wore dusters dark with trail dust. Both carried rifles across their saddles. They moved with the slow, predatory patience of men who knew their prey was already wounded. The first man dismounted near the cottonwood tree. He was broad-shouldered, with a face like a hatchet, all sharp angles and cold eyes. He nudged the blood-stained ground with his boot. He was here, the man said. His voice carried across the stillness like a whip crack. The second rider stayed mounted, younger, nervous, could be dead already. Calhoun spat into the dirt. Not that lucky. He scanned the ravine, his gaze sweeping dangerously close to where Ayana hid. Fletcher's tougher than he looks, and stupider. He had one job, put a bullet in the girl and collect. But he went soft. Ayana's breath stilled. Fletcher, she glanced at the man beside her. His eyes were closed again, his breathing shallow. So that was his name. The man hired to kill her. The man who hadn't. Why'd he even take the job if he wasn't gonna finish it? The younger rider asked. Cause he needed the money, and cause he didn't know who she was. Calhoun's grin was a cruel slash. Not till he saw her face. Then he figured it out. Figured what out? That she's his blood. The words hit Ayana like a fist to the chest. She turned to Fletcher, her pulse roaring in her ears. His face was slack, pale, but even unconscious she could see it now. The shape of his brow, the line of his nose, features she'd only ever seen in the small cracked mirror her aunt kept, the one Ayana avoided because it reminded her of all the questions no one would answer. His blood, her father, this dying man was her father. Don't matter now, Calhoun said, swinging back into his saddle. We finish what he couldn't, find the girl, kill her, bring proof to the boss, and Fletcher, if we find him breathing, we put him down too. They spurred their horses toward the ravine. Ayana's hand moved instinctively to the knife at her belt. 2 against 1. She had no gun, no cover once they came closer. Fletcher was useless, barely alive, but she didn't run. She met her father's half-open eyes, and saw something flicker there, recognition, regret, and something rawer. I won't let them, he rasped. You can't even stand. His hand closed weakly around her wrist. Then leave me, go. She stared at him, and made her choice. No. Mash hash hash. Ayana pulled Fletcher's arm over her shoulder and hauled him upright. He bit back a groan, his weight sagging against her. She half dragged, half carried him deeper into the ravine, toward a narrow split in the rock face she'd noticed earlier, a crevice barely wide enough for one person, let alone two. You're insane, Fletcher whispered. Shut up and move. They stumbled into the gap just as the hoofbeats echoed into the ravine. Ayana pressed them both against the stone, her body shielding his. The space was suffocating, dark, their breaths mingling in the cramped air. Fletcher's forehead rested against her shoulder. Why are you doing this? She didn't answer, couldn't, because she didn't know if it was mercy or anger, or the desperate irrational need to understand why he'd carried her name and her face and hadn't pulled the trigger. You're my father, she said finally, the words sharp and bitter. Aren't you? His silence was answer enough. Outside, Calhoun's voice rang out. Search every goddamn rock. They're here somewhere. Ayana's hand tightened on her knife. Fletcher's fingers brushed hers, not taking the blade, just touching her hand like he was making sure she was real. I didn't know, he whispered. Not until I found you, not until I saw your face and remembered hers. My mother, Takoda. His voice cracked on the name. I loved her, I swear to God I loved her, but the war came, and I thought she'd be safer if I left. I thought, you thought wrong. He flinched. I know, she died, and you weren't there. I know. Ayana's throat burned. Why come back now? Why take the job to kill me? Fletcher's breath shuddered. I didn't know it was you. The man who hired me said there was a Comanche girl causing trouble for his land deal. He showed me a name, a location. I needed the money. I took it. He paused, his voice dropping to something raw and broken. Then I saw your face, and I knew who you were, what I'd almost done. So you just stopped. I couldn't do it. I couldn't. His hand trembled against hers. I tried to leave. Calhoun found out. He shot me, took the contract for himself. A boot scraped against stone nearby. Ayana froze. Calhoun's shadow passed across the gap, inches away. She could smell the tobacco on him, hear his breath. Fletcher's hand closed over hers tighter. For a long, impossible moment, the world held still. Then Calhoun moved on. Ayana let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Fletcher slumped against her, exhausted. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it. She didn't forgive him, but she didn't let go either. Mash hash hash. They waited until nightfall, when the riders finally left, cursing and empty-handed. Ayana guided Fletcher back to the cottonwood tree. She built a small fire, boiled water from her canteen, and cleaned his wound properly this time. He watched her work in silence, his eyes heavy with something she didn't have a name for yet. You should go back to your people, he said quietly. Not yet. They'll come back. Calhoun won't stop. Then we deal with him. She met his gaze. Together. Fletcher stared at her like she'd just offered him something he didn't deserve. Maybe she had. The next morning they rode north together, slowly, carefully. Fletcher was weak, but alive. Ayana led them toward her camp, where her aunt would have questions and the elders would have judgment. She didn't care. She'd made her choice. 3 days later, Calhoun came. He rode into the camp alone, arrogant and armed. He demanded Ayana be turned over. He waved the contract like it was law. Fletcher stepped in front of her. It's void, he said simply. Calhoun laughed. Says who? Says me. I'm taking the job back. No payment, no proof, no girl. You're a damn fool, Fletcher. Yeah, Fletcher said. I know. The standoff lasted only seconds. Ayana's aunt stepped forward, a woman who'd survived 60 winters and feared no white man, and leveled a rifle at Calhoun's chest. Behind her, a dozen warriors materialized from the lodges, silent and ready. Calhoun looked around, calculated, then spat into the dirt and rode away. He never came back. Mash asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. Years later, Ayana would remember that day by the cottonwood tree, the day she found her father dying and chose to save him anyway. She would remember the bullet with her name, still tucked in a leather pouch she kept close, a reminder that survival was always a choice, and mercy was the hardest one. Fletcher stayed, not in her camp, not always close, but near enough. He learned her language. He hunted with the men. He never tried to be her father in the way he'd failed to be before, but he was there, present, trying. And on the nights when the wind carried the scent of sage and the stars burned low, Ayana would sit by the fire and wonder what might have been if she'd left him in the dirt. But she never regretted the choice she made, because sometimes the hardest act of courage isn't pulling the trigger, it's deciding not to. And sometimes the only way to bury the past is to let it live long enough to say sorry. Ayana stands at the edge of the river, the bullet in her palm, the dying sun painting the plains in gold. Behind her, Fletcher's shadow stretches long across the earth, no longer a ghost, no longer a stranger, just a man who came to kill her, and learned instead what it meant to be forgiven.